Death, it is the one certainty we all share, yet it remains the greatest mystery. Throughout history, humanity has grappled with the fear, inevitability, and meaning of death. Ancient philosophers like Socrates and modern thinkers like Martin Heidegger didn't shy away from the topic. Instead, they explored it deeply, offering insights that continue to shape how we think about mortality today. In this exploration, we'll dive into what these great minds teach us about the nature of death, and more importantly, how it shapes the way we live. Socrates and the art of dying well. Socrates, one of the foundational figures of Western philosophy, believed that philosophy itself is a preparation for death. He famously declared, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But why did he tie the pursuit of wisdom to the inevitability of death? For Socrates, death was not something to be feared. In his view, fear of death stems from ignorance. We don't know what lies beyond, so we project our anxieties onto it. Socrates suggested that death is either a transition to an afterlife or a state of peaceful nothingness, like a dreamless sleep. In either case, he argued, it is not something to dread. In Plato's Apology, we see Socrates facing death with remarkable calm. Condemned to die, he used his final moments to teach his followers that the soul's integrity is far more important than physical survival. Socrates believed that living a virtuous life, one devoted to truth and justice, was the key to a good death. To him, the philosopher is always preparing for death by learning to detach from the material world and focus on the eternal soul. His message? Death is not the end of meaning. Instead, it is an opportunity to reflect on the kind of life we've lived and to live in such a way that we can meet death without regret. Heidegger and being toward death. Fast forward to the 20th century, and we find Martin Heidegger, a German philosopher who approached death in a very different way. In his seminal work, Being and Time, Heidegger introduced the concept of being toward death. For Heidegger, death is not just an event at the end of life, it is the defining feature of life itself. Heidegger argued that human beings are unique in their awareness of mortality. Unlike animals, we know that we will die, and this awareness shapes our entire existence. However, most people avoid thinking about death, living in what Heidegger called inauthentic ways, focused on daily distractions, social expectations, and superficial concerns. To live authentically, Heidegger suggested, we must confront the reality of death head-on. Being toward death means embracing our mortality as an essential part of who we are. It's not about being morbid or obsessed with dying, but about recognizing that life is finite and therefore precious. When we acknowledge that our time is limited, it brings urgency and meaning to our choices. Heidegger believed that this confrontation with mortality could liberate us, helping us to live more fully and intentionally. Every decision becomes more significant because it is made in the awareness that life is fleeting. Death as a mirror for life. Both Socrates and Heidegger offer profound insights into how death shapes life. For Socrates, the focus is on living a virtuous life so that death holds no fear. For Heidegger, it is about embracing our mortality to live authentically. Yet, both agree on one essential point: death is not the opposite of life, but its companion, its mirror. When we reflect on death, we are forced to ask, what truly matters? Is it wealth, status, or fleeting pleasures? Or is it the relationships we build, the integrity with which we live, and the courage to pursue what we believe is right? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary if we are to live deeply meaningful lives. Cultural perspectives on death. It's worth noting that Socrates and Heidegger are not alone in their contemplations of death. Many cultures and philosophies across the world offer unique perspectives on mortality. For example, in Buddhism, death is seen as a natural part of the cycle of rebirth. The focus is not on fearing death, but on understanding it as part of the path to enlightenment. The Tibetan Book of the Dead offers guidance on navigating the transition from life to death with mindfulness and grace. Similarly, The ancient Stoics believed that contemplating death was essential for living well. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his Meditations, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." For the Stoics, remembering death was a way to stay grounded, to focus on what is truly important, and to let go of trivial concerns. Living with death in mind. So, how can we apply these philosophical insights to our own lives? First, we can embrace the idea that death is not something to fear, but something to reflect upon. By contemplating our mortality, we gain a clearer perspective on what matters most. We are reminded to cherish our relationships, to act with integrity, and to pursue our passions. Second, we can strive to live authentically, as Heidegger suggests. This means being true to ourselves, making choices that align with our deepest values, and not getting lost in the distractions of everyday life. It's about living with intention, knowing that our time is limited and precious. Lastly, we can adopt the Socratic approach of focusing on the soul. While modern life often emphasizes material success, Socrates reminds us that true fulfillment comes from cultivating wisdom, virtue, and inner peace. In conclusion, the philosophy of death is not about despair. It's about finding meaning. Socrates teaches us to live virtuously so we can face death with peace. Heidegger challenges us to confront our mortality and live authentically. Together, they offer a powerful reminder. Life is brief, but it can be deeply meaningful if we have the courage to face its impermanence. So, what will you do with the time you have? Will you live in fear of death, or will you, like the great philosophers, let the awareness of mortality inspire you to live a life of purpose, courage, and truth? Watch more content in science, philosophy, and psychology on Knowledge tab. Stay curious. Stay inspired.